professional development module that Zainab Blozer has developed on anti-bullying. And one question is, what does bullying really look like, right? And I think what's important here is to be aware that not all bullying looks the same, right? Um, the more common type of bullying that we know for many years has always been the physical bullying. That's the type where you're actually physically harmed, there's verbal abuse and harassment. And more recently, another kind of bullying has at least been recognized, and it's what we call relational bullying. And there, relational bullying is really the attempt to destroy or a threat to destroy an individual's relationships. That is, to attack a person in the context of making that person an isolate, ostracized, or friendless. Now, it's usually assumed that physical bullying is really sort of the domain of boys. And that is still, by and large, true. That is, there are cases, of course, where there's physical bullying among girls, or girls are the perpetrators. But the research shows that physical bullying is still for boys. Destroying reputations, what we call relational aggression. Now, in the literature, up until recently, people thought that was a girl thing. But more recently, we've actually found that boys participate in relational aggression just as much as girls do. So that's kind of something that's important to get out there to the community, that a relational aggression is not just for girls. You just asked the question, what are the effects of bully victimization? That's a really important question. I'd like to really focus mostly on schools. What is the effect of bully victimization in schools? I mean, first of all, it's important to recognize to a bully, schools feel very unsafe. That is, and if you think about it, it's not unsurprising that there are really negative academic effects for students who are bullied. They feel alienated, they feel anxious. Often there's high degrees of absenteeism. I call this the 3 A's, but really the 3 bad A's. Alienation, anxiety, and absenteeism. Okay? There's also, research has clearly shown that victims have lower grades and lower standardized test scores. And they drop out. They don't want to come to school. Okay? So those are the academic effects. And the more common thinking is that there are social effects, and those are also very clear. And I call these the 3 bad D's. Well, bad D's is what you would expect. Repeated victims of bullying start to begin to feel that they deserve that kind of treatment. They develop depressive symptoms, and this is something that often is not recognized. Peers, that is the other members of the school, actually begin to feel that the victim deserves the treatment. So it's kind of a compounding effect. So those are some of the really negative academic and social effects of bullying. How to address the problem in schools. And here I think we can talk about what I'd like to call the 3 C's, which is community, culture, and communication. Okay. Now, if someone like myself remembers back to when I was in school, I have an image of the bully as kind of the kid everybody was afraid of, and he would come walking in down school to the playground, and everybody would kind of cower and get out of the way. But that's actually a slight misconception also. That is, bullies are not just scary dudes. In fact, it's even more serious in schools where bullies are popular. That's really, really much more difficult situation where, in fact, if the bullies are popular, the school is at risk for having this kind of behavior become the norm. So that really says that at the community level, there must be a commitment by all the kids and by the adults to reject and not tolerate bullying. It needs to be preemptive. That is, the adults must not wait for the incident of bullying to occur, but to really set up a climate where students are supported in speaking out against the violations of community trust through strong communication.
Dr. Selman,
Yes.
Can you please answer the question, what are the core social competencies and social emotional learning skills needed to overcome bullying?
Okay, thank you. I want to talk about two broad categories of social competencies. One is a focus on prevention, that is to reduce the opportunities for bullying, and the other is for promotion. That is, what are the kind of things that can promote positive social relationships and not just do away with the bad ones, because they're both very important. And I think some of these ways to deal with bullying are actually well articulated in the professional development that Zainer Bloser has developed. So for both relational and physical bullying, speaking a little bit now about the bully, one approach is anger management. That is, help kids to understand that when they're angry, there are other ways, and to take it out on some scapegoat. Okay? Now, I can mention these ways, but I don't mean to imply they're easy to develop. It's easy to make a list. It's challenging to implement them, because these are often patterns of behavior that are long-standing and are not easily changed. Another very popular approach is cognitive conflict resolution practice. The Voices program does an approach called ABC conflict resolution: ask what the problem is, brainstorm a solution, come to some agreement on how to deal with the solution. In this case, it sounds simple, but I've seen so often a school and a classroom that regularly does these kind of activities as part of the curriculum, not just coming in as a treatment in a crisis situation, often is very helpful for kids. So it's actually, this is an example of something which is not that hard for schools to implement. And then it's important for students to be able to be supported in developing an awareness of why they're bullying. So often the research shows that bullying is, at least in part, a function of a strong need for dominance and control of others. So we feel that if students can be aware that that's what's going on in themselves, they might be able to deal with those kind of feelings in other ways. For example, in the case of a relational aggression, suppose someone who has bullying tendencies is him or herself threatened by the loss of somebody they want to control. And if one can help that student think of other ways to deal with this issue without being coercive or threatening, that will go a long way. To put it on a flip side and make it transition into the positives. In other words, we want to move from power and control to ways to feel one's empowerment oneself. And if we can help kids get alternative ways to feel empowered other than through abuse and control, we'll have gone a long way. Now, with respect to this notion of positive ways to express empowerment, I think small group work around friendship formation, not just for individual kids, but in small groups where the work is not a stigma, where it's not some kind of isolation of a kid with a problem, but saying, look, we have these small groups and we're going to focus on ways to make friends, is another good way to set a climate in the school that will promote the reduction of bullying. And I think this is something that the Voices Literature and Writing program constantly tries to focus on. In a moment, I'll say a couple more words about how the literature focus helps to do that. Very important, and very important for professional development, is to realize that the students in the school, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, need to participate in these interventions so that they know that it's just not, bullying is not just a problem for a few kids, victimization is not a problem for a few kids. This is a school-wide concern, it's a climate issue, and it needs to be addressed as such. And this means that it's especially important for the bystanders to put social pressure on bullying as unacceptable and unpopular. And once again, I want to stress, we often hear about bystanders either joining in on the bullying or standing by and doing nothing. Well, if you think about it, if you've ever been in that kind of situation yourself, and every one of us has, it's very hard to take action under such frightening, scary conditions. So what I'm talking about is not people rushing to be upstanders in moments of crisis, but really sending a constant message that this kind of behavior is unacceptable.
Dr. Selman, the last question. What is the role of multicultural literature and discussion?
Okay. Well, I'd like to start off by speaking a little bit about the role of art in general. That is to include multicultural literature as an art form. And I have a quote from Brian Eno. Do you know who Brian Eno is?
No.
Brian Eno is a musician, okay, very well-known musician. And he says, artists deal in this rather nebulous area I call the rehearsal of empathy. That's what he thinks artists do. Writers, musicians, painters. You're rehearsing a repertoire of feelings that you might have had about things, a way of reacting to things, of how it would feel to be in a situation, how it would feel to be in that person's place. What would I have done? Such questions are the most essential human questions because they deal with how we negotiate as mental beings through a very complicated universe. So that was Brian commenting on the value and purpose of art, I think. So I want to talk a little bit first about the discussion aspects and then a little bit about the multicultural aspects. I mean, beyond, as you know, this professional development module on bullying is closely aligned with a project that I've been very close to, worked on, and fond of, called Voices, Literature and Writing. And I think it's a marvelous approach, and I am looking very forward to seeing what impact it can have on our nation's schools. But beyond the impact of a program like Voices, which uses children's literature as a central emphasis on reading, it also has a very important impact in enabling students to understand, have the opportunity to understand what are the tensions that are inherent in social situations. That's one of the roles of literature beyond helping kids to learn how to read. It's to help them understand the humanities. So I think one of the important features of multicultural literature in general, is, as Brian Eno said, but I'll put it in our terms, to practice perspective taking, to understand the motives of the characters in the literature. It enables kids to go inside characters' heads in ways that may not be feasible in everyday life, because you don't often get a chance to say, hey, why did you do that? What are you thinking? How are you feeling? And it helps you to develop empathy, engagement, and even, I think, very importantly, ethical reflection. So you might say those are the 3 E's here, that is, of why literature and multicultural literature is important. Now let's take the multicultural side of things. If children are using multicultural literature to deal with issues of, let's say, bullying, so that's our focus, but of course a wide range of social issues, from being shy to being unjustly treated. It's really very useful for a student, a young child, to read about someone else their own age who's grappling with a variety of cultural expectations that they're grappling with. That's very, very important. And so the use of literature in general simply serves to help kids do that. The complement to that is that while on the one hand, literature can help one understand someone like oneself, it also can help one understand someone who's very different, and that's also very important. So this kind of an approach can help young students look past differences and be aware of the hopes and dreams we all struggle with, regardless of our culture or ethnicity.